Yeah. Roberta in the truth zone, mic hitting raw. Spotlight shining, she exposing the flaw. Debunking the myth, breaking their facade. This is Glass City, respect the squad. On these NYC blocks where the skyline flex big. Roberta Glass slicing lies with a truth rig. Innocence frosters, your stories unravel. She's a map through the madness of gritty gravel. Glass don't bend and facts don't break. She's a storm that's called, you feel the quake. Exposing tales stitched with crooked seams. Justice in the lens, shattered fake dreams. Screams about killers, painted heroes in disguise. She burning propaganda with fire in her eyes. No glamour for the guilty, she call it straight. She backs victims, the voice stay awake. Stats and receipts, no spin, no clutter. Cold cases whisper, she cuts through the mutter. Truth's her tempo, don't confuse the beat. She's standing for the real while you taking a seat. True crime's a block, facts the artillery. Spinning those lies, yo, she checks that misery. Tabloid tales get smashed, no time to play. She's glass hard, break the false and save the day. True crime's a block, facts the artillery. Spinning those lies, yo, she checks that misery. Tabloid tales get smashed, no time to...
Okay, here we go. Hello, Wesley. Loves Octoberfest. I haven't seen you here in a while. Where you been, stranger? Maestro. First of all, I have to... Special shout out to Maestro in a minute. Hold on. Hello, Maestro. Kelly, Dean Walker, Tater. I really want to thank... hello, everybody. Nice to see everybody. But I want to thank my moderator, Maestro, for spending a ridiculous amount of time helping me fix the Google Chrome on my computer, making this episode possible and last episode possible. I really appreciate it. It is back to full working order. So lovely. Hello, kitties. All right. I have what I think is a really interesting, fascinating hearing today. So for those that didn't follow it, in the early morning hours of November 13th, 2022, 4 University of Idaho students, Gailey Gonzalez, Madison Mogen, Ethan Chapin, and Zaina Kernodle were fatally stabbed in their off-campus housing in Moscow, Idaho. And on December 30th of that same year, Bryan Kohberger was arrested in Monroe County, Pennsylvania, charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of felony burglary. Kohberger was a PhD student completing his first semester at Washington State University in Pullman, Washington, which was less than 8 miles away from Moscow, Idaho. And prosecutors initially were seeking the death penalty. It was such a heinous crime, and a crime really that we've never learned the motive for. But and there was lots of true crime channels grifting and saying that the law enforcement had done a bad job, that they caught the wrong person, that it was maybe someone else. That familiar story. But on July 2nd, 2025, Bryan Kohberger himself put an end, at least for a little while. I'm not saying it won't be resurrected, that kind of true crime media around this case, the kind of whodunit, solved crimes, true crime media or true crime entertainment that we've come to expect. From the Western world. But he put an end to that by pleading guilty to all charges. And mainly to avoid the death penalty. And it's a really good argument for why the death penalty should exist for plea deals like this. Not all the victims' family members were happy with it. Certainly, Gailey Gonzalez's father spoke out very strongly against it. He wanted a trial. And I said at the time, I'm not sure that he knows what he would be up against in a trial. I think this was like the plea deal was about the best outcome, I felt, for all the victims' family members. And many of them supported the plea deal. So he was sentenced to 4 consecutive life sentences. He's never getting out, hopefully. You don't know how laws will change or how things change over time. Certainly, we've seen in true crime court orders coming down one way and changing on a dime. People are given life sentences and watching those life sentences being overturned. But in this case, we're hoping he never gets out. And part of that plea deal, so this is the really important part to today's episode and the hearing that we're about to watch. Part of that plea deal was that Bryan Kohberger signed and that his defense team agreed to was that he would pay restitution to the victims' family members. And now he's saying, look, I'm, despite, as the prosecution brings up in this hearing, despite getting a 5 figures added to his bank account in jail awaiting trial. So an amount of 5 figures, he just can't pay it, and their defense team is saying that he can't pay it and he can't be expected to pay it. And it's unclear, at least by this hearing, what if they're willing to pay any of it. So we'll watch it together. But it brings up, I think, one of the more fascinating, spoiler alert, one of the more fascinating parts of this hearing is when they talk about, the prosecution talks about wanting to put in a provision specifically into, like, that Bryan Kohberger should not benefit in any way at all from his crimes. And the defense says, well, of course he's not going to benefit from his crimes. He's not going to wreak any financial benefit from his crimes. That's illegal. We have laws against that in Idaho. And this is something I've been saying for a long time on this channel. Those laws mean nothing. So listen to the judge's response. He goes specifically in all the ways that Bryan Kohberger could benefit by selling his story that might benefit the victim's family. There is no benefit to Bryan Kohberger selling his story that would benefit the victim's family. All the true crime entertainment that's going to benefit, where the finances are in some way going to benefit Bryan Kohberger, is going to be the kind of Making a Murderer, Innocence Fraud mockumentaries that we've seen, serial podcasts, just more Innocence Fraud, or Let's Solve a Solved Crime kind of media that we've all become so accustomed to. So let's just take a look at this together. It's not a long hearing, and one that Bryan Kohberger didn't attend himself, but one I found absolutely fascinating, and was really excited to come on and talk about it with you guys, because it backs up so much what what I've been saying on this channel about how we treat victims and how killers game the system. So just for those in the back, when Bryan Kohberger signed this plea deal, they would have gone over, his lawyers would have gone over each little detail with him. Are you willing to do this? You're willing to do that? You're sure? Now they say, oh, we can't pay it. Sorry. To come back to the court is, I mean, another judge might have been really angry at a defense attorney who came to the court after they had their client sign a plea deal like this. Not 5 years ago, not 10 years ago, but several months ago. I don't know. What is July? I don't know. When did he, what is July? What is July till November? What kind of word would you use to describe that? Whatever you want to describe from July to November. I mean, unreal. So take a listen. Here we go. And it's done by Zoom. Bryan Kohberger didn't have to attend. He was absent.
All right, let's go on the record in State v. Kohberger, CR 0124316665. The defendant has been excused from today's proceedings. It is not present. The defense is represented by Ms. Massoff, Ms. Taylor, and Ms. Barlow. The state is represented by Mr. Thompson. This is a time set for a hearing on the state's supplemental request for restitution. The state can argue first.
Thank you, Your Honor. The attached documentation, it doesn't appear that there's a question about the amounts. I think the question that has been raised is whether the propriety of any additional restitution being ordered at this point. Yesterday afternoon, we did receive a supplemental filing from the defense, and I want to respond to that just for the record before I address the merits of the restitution requests themselves. As we indicated in our response to the defense objection to the additional restitution request, at the time that we entered into the plea agreement, Ms. Jennings and I were under the impression that crime victims' compensation could be available to cover reimbursement of travel expenses. And I have to clarify that now. It is true that before trial, the families approached our office asking if there were any resources we were available to pay in advance for travel expenses or expenses related to them attending trial itself. And we looked into that, our staff looked into that, and advised them no. It was my understanding, and I'm mistaken. I realized I was mistaken at this point, but it was my understanding back in early July, late June, when we were talking about the plea agreement, that crime victims' compensation could be available to reimburse expenses like that. I now know that's not correct, and it was certainly my mistake. I will.
So does everybody get that? Is no, can't pay for your travel expenses. Hope your loved one gets murdered nearby. Because now there's not only can they not pay for your travel expenses, there's no victims' rights law on the books that pays for your travel expenses, they can't ask for the killer to pay for your travel expenses. So there's no money for the travel expenses. So considerable cost to you to travel to the area.
Own it as far as our state of mind going into the plea agreement.
So
That being said,
go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. I'll let you finish the point on the plea agreement, and then I have a question for you about that.
And I was just finishing that point, Your Honor, so this would be a good time.
Okay. So it's pretty well settled that plea agreements are interpreted as contracts, which they are. I think it's pretty well settled contract law that a unilateral mistake does not relieve one of its contractual obligations and restrictions. So how can I order this restitution if the express terms of the plea agreement, though mistaken understanding by the state, don't allow such extra crime victims compensation fund reimbursement?
And Your Honor, I recognize that, and that's what I was just getting ready to address. In response to the defense's objection, the state has modified or adjusted our position on the restitution. We are, pursuant to the plea agreement, seeking restitution for the funeral-related expenses, which are the urns that are described in Exhibit 2 to our response. We are not affirmatively advocating for the travel expenses and lodging expenses of the family because we do not.
So already they've kind of gamed the system because they didn't ask for it ahead of time in the restitution agreement, and they're no longer asking for travel expenses. They're not even sure if they thought that the law covered it. It sounded like, to my ear, let me know if I'm hearing it right, and it doesn't cover it, so they can't ask for it. They didn't work it out ahead of time, and now they're walking it back, and they're just asking, and listen to this, for these small sums of money for funeral expenses. I mean, just remember that Bryan Kohberger hadn't done this, they'd all be alive. And talk about lack of remorse. I mean, what a ballsy move. So I am not a judge. I mean, just seeing this from the defense, this kind of motion from the defense would enrage me as a judge. Now you don't want to pay anything? You want to get all the benefits from a plea deal, and now you don't want to pay anything? Really? Hey, Wesley loves Octoberfest. Thanks for the cat door cash. Appreciate it. Isn't it Kelly? Kelly says the gall. Right. Yeah, they're human, right? But I'm not so sure, Bossy. Hey, Bossy. I'm not so sure. So Bossy, Texas chick says, so Thompson messed up. I can hear Steve Gonzalez now. Uh-oh. So Kat would prefer the money go to the treat fund. There's plenty of money in the treat fund. The treats are always well stocked here, believe me. I'm not sure. I just don't think that before they asked for this travel expense thing, I don't think it's covered. I think that's why it wasn't. I bet they followed some kind of standard plea deal agreement, and restitution is probably worked out in some kind of supplemental deal, but now they say it's just too much. I'd love to know exactly how much Bryan Kohberger got. The defense makes it sound like it's all from his family, and then they make it sound like things have changed, right? So that now that he's pled out, his family no longer wants to give him any money, which I don't believe. which makes me think that most of it came from the public thinking that he was innocent. And once he pled out, for now it's dry until people start capitalizing on some true crime, innocence fraud media and start capitalizing on this case again. And people will start sending him money. So I would think that a lot of this came from the public, a lot of that 5 figures. I mean, we've seen Luigi Mangione get over $1 million. I've heard as high as $1.5 million with that accused killer. Other famous pretrial murder cases, Karen Reed, she made more than $1 million. I think a lot of money on this and is still cashing in on it, on her crime. So crime pays in America, but to come and pretend like you can't pay anything is ridiculous.
We can legally advocate for those. At the same time, the families provided those to us, and we want to provide them to the court and counsel just so everybody was aware that they are there, but we are not arguing affirmatively for that because of the wording of the plea agreement itself. So what the state is actually requesting today is just additional restitution for the funeral related expenses, which are the earns for the families.
Okay, thank you. And you can address the other issues as well.
I'm sorry, Your Honor, which other issues?
Well, the issues, if you'd like, raised in opposition to your motion, including the lack of ability to pay by a defendant and et cetera.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. I apologize. The defendant has raised the issue of his alleged inability to pay, and we recognize that he's going to be incarcerated until he dies. But that in and of itself doesn't mean that over the course of the balance of his life, he might become, he might receive assets. And in fact, we attached a breakdown of the types of monies that he has received during his incarceration. We also noted the statute that allows the treasurer to intercept prospective monies that might be received based on any attempted publication of the story of the defendant. And those, if received, would be something that a restitution order could be enforced against. We also note that the language of the statute and the case law interpreting the restitution statute, which is 1953-04, if I believe, off the top of my head.
Right. So he's saying, like, should he make any money from selling his story, it would go to the victim's family. A little bit like O.J. Simpson's book, where the Goldman family had to sue, and then they owned the rights to that manuscript because O.J. constantly insisted on profiting off of his crime. And that's an interesting aspect to look at in the Karen Reed case. Should the O'Keefe family win civilly, what's going to happen with her movie money, etc., all the other ways that I would predict Karen Reed will try to profit in the future. So I'm just wondering where the outrage is. Where, the DA is supposed to be a voice for the victim's family. They're not going to, I mean, do they want this kind of media out there? Do they want him making deals? Would they prefer the horribly offensive media to gain the money? Should the money go to them from that horribly offensive media that's going to be created out of that? I mean, what's happened with true crime media is that victims, the idea of considering victims' family members and their feelings have been totally forgotten. It's how much money can you make? What killer can you prop up as innocent? It gets more stomach turning every year to watch this community. And there's so few not doing it. I mean, pick any of them, all the major channels are doing it, major podcasts are grifting off of innocence fraud and innocence fraud media. I mean, how would Bryan Kohberger sell his story? I guess he could say why I did it, if I did it, why I did it, OJ kind of book or documentary. Maybe they could. But again, it's just kind of a re-victimization of the victim's family members.
Talks about current inability to pay is not necessarily a block to the order of restitution. It's just merely a factor for the court to consider. And it is our position, given the relative youth of the defendant, the fact that he has been receiving significant monies during his incarceration already, and that there is the possibility of future monies, whether by virtue of the statute with the treasurer impounding proceeds from a story related to this, or perhaps from an inheritance from his family or others. We can't see into the future. We don't have a perfect crystal ball. The state's position is having this additional restitution place, which is really fairly minimal, would be appropriate, and have them available that if the defendant comes into assets, that the families would be able to try to satisfy the restitution orders from them.
Thank you. And then who's arguing for defense?
I will be, Your Honor.
All right.
Thank you. Given that the state has clarified its position that it's only seeking reimbursement for the earns, it's my understanding that that amount is $1,420 for one family, $1,587.79, and then another $167.79, which would be a total, I believe, if my math is right, of $3,075.58. My understanding of reading the Victims Compensation Code 1953-04 is that the court must still do an analysis on Mr. Kohberger's ability to pay. And as the state has addressed, we are arguing that he does not have an ability to pay. While there have been lump sums provided to you regarding some funds that he received prior to his plea agreement, what the court does not have is a breakdown of how those funds came into the inmate system for his expenses and the fact that they were primarily family. Certainly his situation.
Okay, so you heard it was primarily family. Primarily family. So he's saying his family member is giving 5 figures, and he's already, in the time that he's been locked up, he's already been through 5 figures worth, and there's nothing there for anyone. I mean, it's such a small sum. He also has fines. So the total of this with the victim restitution is $300,000. Am I correct on that? Hold on one second. Let me double check that, but I think I'm right on that. It's something like that. Yeah, $300,000 in fines and restitution. So restitution's a tiny part of that. Why isn't he talking about how he doesn't want to pay the fines? I mean, the fines are the bigger part. It's just re-victimizing the victim's family by proxy. This is what this is about. The name of the game, power and control. What about getting a job in prison? I know it pays pennies on the dollar, whatever, compared to, there's no minimum wage. But I'm sure in his long prison sentence, he could definitely pay off this restitution over time. Doesn't want to pay it off. Can't do it. Sorry. We'll see what the judge says at the end. It's kind of fascinating hearing.
Pre-plea and sentencing was drastically different than it is right now in terms of money that is available to him. And there's nothing in the record to provide the court with anything other than what is really speculation based on the past, as opposed to something that the court might be able to rely upon about foreseeability. There's no way that Mr. Kohberger is ever going to profit from any sort of movie or book, because Idaho Code 1953-01 specifically precludes that.
Well, it
and
precludes, it allows that monies are swept from his account for those income to pay certain things. If those certain things, if there's no debt for those certain things, then does the money not go then to the defendant?
that is not my reading of the code. Perhaps I'm reading that statute more broadly than.
So the judge is saying, no, he can profit. That's if he doesn't already owe money for restitution, fines, something else. Seems like he can profit. And then he goes on later, spoiler alert, later to say, well, maybe someone else can pay him. There's nothing stopping someone else for getting his salary, and then just donating it, wink, wink, to him. I mean, that's what essentially how I heard it later on in this hearing, to Bryan Kohberger, donating it to his commissary fund or whatever else it is, whatever, his prison fund. How do you go through? I get that everything's expensive in prison, phone time, etc., but how do you go through 5 figures in such a short period of time? What is he doing? I mean, he's getting a lot of packages. I don't know what. Where's all this money going?
The court is, I understood it to be that the purpose is that someone can't then profit off of their crime pursuant to that statute. I guess I need to read it with
even allowing
implication.
even allowing your reading of it. What's to prevent, for example, a family member from agreeing to provide information, be a part of, et cetera, a story, movie, book, whatever, TV series about the murders, about Mr. Kohberger, and that certainly wouldn't be monies they receive wouldn't be subject to the statute, and then they certainly would be free to send Mr. Kohberger money to his account. What harm is it to order the restitution, which would then sort of jump in line in terms of priority of payments over some of the other ordered payments, such that if Mr. Kohberger does receive money into his accounts from any source, that he's then that those monies are then put to that use. Certainly, we're not worried about Mr. Kohberger's credit rating with having debts at this point. I'm not sure what the concern would be to, given the uniqueness of this case and the potential for family members, et cetera, to earn money from it, and potentially we've seen members of the public send money to Mr. Kohberger, is my understanding, to his books. What's the downside to ensuring that the victims are as whole as possible from this by ordering the restitution, which again would jump in line from some of the other court-ordered fines, et cetera. And if the money's there, it's there.
So, I mean, the reason I wanted to share this hearing is for every time someone says that, oh no, you're wrong, there's Son of Sam laws. So the history of Son of Sam laws is when they wanted to make a book by Nick Pileggi called Wise Guys into a movie, which it did become a movie. A very famous, critically acclaimed movie called Goodfellas, directed by Martin Scorsese. They realized that interfered with the Son of Sam laws. And in order to sell those book rights as movie rights, they had to totally eliminate the Son of Sam laws, which they did in New York and other states. They're so weakened. So even if you do put some kind of like statute like this that says like, well, they can't profit off their crime before paying the victim's family members back and the state back, etc., for their crime. There's what the judge is saying is there's other ways to go around it. So a movie company could make a deal with Bryan Kohberger that his fee will be paid to X person and that it will be deposited in his commissary. That's part of his deal that way. So he gets compensation that way. So there's a million ways that they game the system. And what's left of those kind of, even the idea of those Son of Sam laws is really nothing in this country. And we've seen Julius Jones was making like $30,000 a month from prison, selling T-shirts and sneakers and stuff after his death sentence got overturned just due to an innocence fraud campaign, nothing else. I mean, it's just the profit, even though there are statutes in Oklahoma and those kind of things, it just doesn't matter. There's who's going to, the problem also is who cares to enforce these laws? Not many people. And what's left of any kind of victims' rights movement in this country is almost nil.
If it's not, it's not.
Judge, I don't see that Idaho code or Idaho law asks the court to make an analysis on the downside, but whether or not there is foreseeability of payment. And all of the things that you just listed are pure speculation. There is no book or movie that's in the works by any of his family, and to say that those things are going to happen is absolutely speculative, and there's nothing to substantiate those sorts of assertions happening in the future. So
Well, there's a history in the 3 years he was incarcerated of him receiving 5 figures put on his books. Doesn't that give the court some history to suggest that such contributions from whatever source may continue into the future?
as I stated earlier, Judge, that was at a different time in the case. That was at a time when, he had not entered a plea. He was not deemed convicted of the crime. The money, a lot of that money was coming from his family to be able to have.
So wait, so are they saying that his family believed in his innocence and now they don't? Is that what his lawyer is saying here? Or is she saying that it largely, by saying the reverse, she's saying it largely came from the family, but did it largely come from the public? And now that the kind of innocence fraud media has died down, there's not as much. Why is there, listen to how vague it gets when they talk about how little money there is left for this like ridiculously low sum of restitution. The fines are high. The fees are, the fines he's getting are nothing to sneeze at. But they're asking for essentially funeral expenses for the 4 people he murdered. And they don't want to pay that. It's not like they need more time to do it. They all knew this was coming. They signed on to this. This was part of the plea deal. Restitution was part of the plea deal. And now they're like, 4 months later, no. And the gall of this defense attorney to come in and do this. What a soulless, disgraceful human being she is. To come in and do this and say, no, there's no way we can actually arrange for paying for funeral expenses. And disingenuous at that. I mean, that's a nice word for saying I don't believe her. I think she's a liar. That's just my opinion. Who does believe her in the audience? I'd be curious to know.
Communications with their son and brother, and to speculate that those kinds of dollars are going to be able to happen for the next many decades is exactly that. It's pure speculation, not based on something that is foreseeable or based in something that's in fact before this court.
Well, it just seems to me that one of the, really, obviously,
So what I hear is we want the court to be on the back foot. So when the deal is already paid and when we already have something going on, right now it's a good time to say we can't pay it. Maybe his actual funds are low right now. Maybe, just maybe not. But who's gonna be looking and really keeping track of Bryan Kohberger? Not in the next 10 years, in the next 20 years, in the next 30 years. Who's going to be keeping track of the money coming in his account and the true crime media created around his case and the deals that he might or might not be making? Seriously. I mean, I get that Thompson has a different style than where's the outrage? Where's the outrage?
Even application of statute requires the court to look at what might happen into the future. And I guess, it seems to me one of the best indicators of the future is the past. And in the past, his family has, you're saying the family was the source of much of these funds, has provided him funds in order for him to communicate, et cetera. That necessity will still exist going forward. I'm not aware of his family having disowned him at this point and not wanting any contact with him. And even if they are, that doesn't mean that won't change. And you call it speculation. It seems to me that it is good evidence of what may occur in the future in light of what has occurred in the past.
Well, Judge, there is a judgment against him in the amount of $28,000, and certainly 20% of every dollar that goes into his inmate account is going to go towards paying that $28,000. Another factor that the court actually can look at under 1953-04 subsection 7 is other factors, and those factors that other factors that the court deems appropriate, and that can be collateral resources that the families obtained over $200,000, which definitely reimburse the cost of the earns in terms of economic costs.
I also want to turn to the plea agreement, because isn't a reasonable interpretation of the plea agreement that the defendant will not contest the state's seeking of restitution that is outlined in the plea agreement? Otherwise, why would it need to be in the plea agreement?
Did everybody just hear that for those in the back? So part of what they signed in the plea agreement was that they would not contest paying restitution. And here they are contesting restitution. Why isn't the judge handing this lawyer her behind? You signed this. You had your client sign this. Now you don't want to pay. It's so, what I find is just the morality of it so morally offensive. But just on a surface level, for her lawyerly duties, to have her client sign something and then come back months later and be like, just kidding. We were just kidding when we signed this. Weak judge, weak prosecutor. This is about the tone of our The outrage has totally left our judicial system, except for convicted killers and predators and their feelings. Then it's keyed up. Then the motion is keyed up with high emphasis on empathy with the convicted, and the victim and the victim's family are ghosted altogether out of this. This is just like a mere formality. Can someone remind the court that without Bryan Kohberger, 4 people would still be alive? That the Chapin family would still have their son. The Kernodle family would still have Zaina. The Gonzalez family would still have Kaylee. The Mojan family would still have Madison. I mean, they've been sentenced to a life sentence of grief. And I'm not sure what this $28,000, I wish I knew a little bit more about that, particulars about what that, they're going to pay that back in time somehow, that judgment. Yeah, that's what happens when you murder 4 people. Hopefully, it doesn't make your life easy in prison. But here's the legal system or judicial system ready to make it as easy for Bryan Kohberger as possible.
It seems to me it's the plea agreement. A reasonable interpretation is the defendant is agreeing to pay restitution for those items that are identified in the plea agreement, which includes victims' compensation, which includes in this case funeral expenses. So you took advantage of the plea agreement to get the benefit of the bargain regarding the state's dropping of the death penalty. Why should you not be held to the plea agreement to pay the victims the costs of interning their children?
Judge, I believe that our pleading was clear, that we understood that burns fell underneath a funeral cost, but that once we have a hearing on this matter, that doesn't eliminate the court's duty under 1953-04 to do the ability to pay analysis. And that's why.
Well, are you in violation of the plea agreement by arguing that your client shouldn't have to pay those?
We are not in violation of the plea agreement. If there was any violation of the plea agreement that took place, it's the state seeking this when the other expenses, when it was clear under statute and under the Idaho Victims Compensation rules that those were not reimbursable expenses.
So just to be clear, thank you, Craig. So just to be clear, okay? Just to be clear on this, she's saying because the state got it wrong. This is what this lawyer was saying, right? Because this state, yeah, it was court TV. Okay. Because the state got it wrong that they thought that that Bryan Kohberger should pay travel expenses. That is akin to her and her client essentially agreeing to this plea agreement that not only agrees to pay restitution, but agrees not to fight paying restitution. So when the judge asks, are you in violation of the plea agreement? I'll answer the question. Yes, she's in violation of the plea agreement. This was done in July. This is 4 months later. And she's back in court saying, no, we're not going to pay it. They just signed it. The ink is still fresh on this agreement. And they've already violating it. Why isn't the judge handing her behind here? I don't understand it. It's so clear to me that she's in no standing at all to say that she can't pay this piddly sum. For the funeral expenses. I mean, that's all, that's it. It's not like some kind of pain and suffering clause written in. For funeral expenses, that's it. They're like, nope, my client doesn't have it. But he is paying some other kind of $28,000. And the rest of the fines, which according to all the media I read, comes up to about $300,000 altogether. That we're not. It's just the funeral. It's just the things that deal with the victim's family. It's a small amount that we're saying we can't pay. I mean, come on. And so I listened to Court TV talking about this, and there was zero outrage. Zero outrage. I don't know. Maybe I'm just built different. I don't get it. But every day I'm watching one convicted killer, predator game the system. In England, it's Barry George. He can't come to court because he's sick. Here it's Bryan Kohberger. They can't pay the victim's family. And so many. I mean, if you think he's going to just do his time quietly, I'd be very shocked. If not in 10 years or so, we don't, or about 14 years or so, we see some kind of innocence fraud media coming out of this case. That the state really got it wrong, that Bryan Kohberger was terrified in signing the plea agreement. He had to.
But they've effectively withdrawn.
Right. It was so stacked against him. He was forced to sign it. He was threatened into signing it. Bad assistance of counsel, whatever they're going to say. But it was really some other guy who did it. Some other vague other person. And then in comes the parade of new and ridiculous suspects.
Those requests and are seeking what's outlined in the plea agreement. What's the point of the plea agreement on restitution if the defense is able to argue against the restitution called for in the plea agreement itself?
Judge, again, in our pleading, we objected to what the state has withdrawn as of this moment at this hearing today.
Right.
We acknowledge that the earns were funeral expenses.
Right.
But once we're in a situation of having a hearing, then this other section about whether or not he has an ability to pay is triggered. We stipulated to $28,000 in restitution within 60 days.
Right.
He met the terms of the plea agreement.
But it also says the state may seek restitution regarding funeral expenses, and they're simply identifying additional funeral expenses.
I don't know what more you want me to say about the earns other than
What's
they
the
are-
point of the plea agreement if you're not going to be bound by it?
I agreed that it was $3,075.58.
But you say you shouldn't have to pay it.
What I said was that the court needs to do the analysis under Idaho code about his ability to pay.
Why?
So it's a really good question by the judge. What's the point of the plea agreement? It goes unanswered if he's not going to pay it. But what's the good of anything? I mean, what comes to mind? I mean, I could bring up other things. Other things get decided in a case. And it goes to a different kind of court. I'm thinking of Marty Tankla just off the top of my head when they decided not to retry him for the murder of his adoptive parents, Arlene and Seymour Tankleff. Cuomo wrote a long decision about how Marty Tankleff should not be in any way looked at as innocent. Like he did it, essentially. And he deserves no compensation. And then he goes on to rake in millions in compensation from our civil court. So essentially, what does any of these agreements mean? They don't mean it. They mean everything as far as the state having to follow them. But for the defendant, there's a million ways to appeal and go around things. I mean, you know, I think I saw Wesley was saying earlier that no one really cares, but I mean, crime is definitely going up and it's going to keep going up in New York City. And there's going to be more and more victims and more victims' family members. This will come to a crisis point at some point.
Hasn't the defendant waived his right to rely on that ability to pay by agreeing to those expenses as part of the plea agreement?
I don't know how the court can enter this order today without engaging in the analysis under Idaho code because it's required. That's the way I review the case law and the code, that once there's a hearing about restitution, then the court has to engage in the analysis on the ability to pay.
So the agreement to pay is illusory.
No, he agreed to $28,000. We've agreed that earns fall underneath.
Does he have the ability to pay that?
No, he does not have the ability.
So why did you agree to it?
Because it was a specific, we were provided with those receipts within 60 days. We were not provided with the receipt for the earns within 60 days.
So is your objection then a timeliness objection?
We did raise a timeliness objection in our pleading. I have thought about that and whether or not I think that it is a really valid argument to say that that's completely jurisdictional. I didn't to mean that the court can't take this under the review at this
It's not exactly a timeliness issue, she's saying. I don't know. It's just all so crazy. Not exactly a timeliness problem. I mean, most of these restitution issues, when you go to sentencing hearings, they say we're going to work out the restitution. Usually, the restitution is worked out at the time of the sentencing, not at the plea deal. At the plea deal, they say we're going to work out restitution at sentencing. Usually, you see some of it at sentencing, and if it's not totally worked out, it's forthcoming. But 60 days. This has been 4 months. It's like this piddly sum. So the question as to why if he can't pay the $28,000, why he's opposing this piddly sum for the victim's family is because they can walk all over the victim's family members, and because it wasn't worked out immediately. And why it didn't come sooner, I'd be curious to ask D.A. Thompson why he didn't have the funeral expenses. Why wasn't that submitted in 60 days? Curious why that wasn't a priority for the DA's office there.
Point in time, I didn't read the judgment language in such a strict fashion that I felt like we could say 61 days means the court's not going to consider it at all. So it is past your 60-day deadline, but I don't know that that is completely jurisdictional in the way that you drafted your judgment.
Anything else?
No.
Thank you. Mr. Thompson, any rebuttal?
No, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I'll take the matter under advisement, issue an opinion.
Yeah, not my favorite DA, and certainly not my favorite defense attorney. And Judge asked some good questions, but seriously, come on, guys. It's like the worst offense in our murder's considered the worst offense in our judicial system for a reason. Where's the outrage? Where is the outrage? I'm just going to be so curious, just the way that Bryan Kohberger continues to go through his time in prison. He obviously read the room, and he doesn't mind re-victimizing the victim's family members again. I mean, one could look at this filing as just a re-victimization of this victim's family members again, and a way to just needle them and hurt them and hope that he doesn't have to pay them. I mean, really the question that was never answered as to why this and not anything else. Why is this the thing he doesn't want to pay? Which is the sole money he owes the victim's family members. And one could make an argument, and I think it's a fair argument, that the reason why is because he wants to continue to re-victimize the victim's family members and make them suffer. It's one of his last exercises of power. And there's always and his creepy, soulless defense attorney will do his bidding for him. It's really like the most disturbing field of a bunch of people, these lawyers that over the past almost, I think it's 9 years I've been doing this podcast, and I've looked at one lawyer's personality after the next and what they're willing to argue in front of the court. just, I mean, talk about lost moral compass, talk about no moral compass at all. And I mean, she can talk about code this and, well, it just doesn't fall under the code, like it's some kind of technicality. I mean, none of it really has, I mean, what you heard in this hearing was that the judge trying to make legal sense out of it certainly doesn't make legal sense. And the only conclusion you can come to really at the end is that Bryan Kohberger doesn't want to pay the victim's family members. He wants them to get no money. And the part that enraged me was the Bryan Kohberger's lawyer scoffing at the idea that he would ever profit from his crime. As if we are not in a time when we are seeing murderers make a record profit from their crimes with zero outrage. It's almost like awe from the public and zero outrage. So when Luigi Mangione's defense fund gets brought up, or another killer du jour GoFundMe, or accused killer du jour's GoFundMe, it's just like, wow, they raised that much? It's just kind of like a wow. There isn't the disgust that I think that should rightfully come with this, all this. But more, there will be more victims. I mean, Chicago, New York City, we're watching crime go up and up and up. There will be more victims' family members, unfortunately. And the way our justice system is treating them, and the way that, not just our justice system, but our media, public at large generally, this kind of re-victimization will continue to go on. So that's what I have for today. I want to thank Beth, Sally Safford. Thank you for becoming Patreon members. It's a great way to support the channel. Venmo, also a great way to support the channel. Send a donation. Buy me a coffee, another great way to support the channel. This is a listener-supported channel. I will be back very soon, probably tomorrow, with another episode at 6 p.m. I'll see you guys then. Thanks so much for listening and hanging out and watching this very enraging hearing with me. I'll see you tomorrow, guys. Have a great night, everybody. Oh, wait, hold on one second. I didn't. Okay, here we go. But, okay, psych. I thought now this really is the end of the show. Have a great night, everybody.
Mic check, Roberta strides through the static haze. True crime Gotham where the shadows play their plays. Fraudsters fold when a spotlight beams. Fact-focused queen busting propaganda schemes. Glass shatter lies echoes through the streets. Standing for victims, giving voice their beats. NYC Post, truth sharp as night. Roberta exposing she's the anti-fraud light. Hard task warrior, dissecting state and defense. Twisted innocence, claims breaking pretense. Gotham's truth seeker cuts clean with the blade. Facts in the forefront, no justice gets swayed. Cold facts drip heavy, real talk unfurls. Cracking cases open like oysters with pearls. Innocence gimmicks crumble to dust in the wind. For victims, her creed, justice till the end. Headphones blazing, she drops heavy. heavy artillery. Narratives twisted, meet blunt object civility. Roberta got receipts that unravel the ploy, exposing the lies these fraudsters deploy. Glass shatters lies, echoes through the streets, standing for victims, giving voice their beats. NYC Pulse, truth sharp as night. Roberta exposing, she's the anti-fraud light.